liked it, friended it, followed it.
There were a lot of awesome dramatic moments in the 4th volume of the Ninja Turtles comic books. But one of the most dramatic and intense stories told by Peter Laird actually occurred in the letters column, and not in the comic itself. It all started at the end of issue 11, when Peter Laird began describing a mysterious piece of technology in a very long essay. Peter heard through the grapevine that this new invention would be bigger than the internet and would change the way cities are built. Even Jeff Bezos and Steve Jobs were excited for this new technology, according to Peter Laird. There was even speculation it was going to be an anti-gravity machine. Unfortunately, Peter Laird revealed this revolutionary piece of technology to be the Segway, an electric scooter. Peter Laird was disappointed, but he bought one anyway. Peter Laird had to pay a deposit and was required to take a 2-hour training session to purchase a $5,000 Segway scooter. Peter Laird was the only person in his Segway training group, which isn't a good sign that the Segway would be bigger than the internet. Peter fell in love with the Segway. He even put a few Segway pictures on the back cover of issue 11. He goes on to share his experience of how riding the Segway around Northampton made him a local celebrity. Peter would enthusiastically answer questions about its price and top speed, 12 miles per hour. He speculated that the slightly goofy look of the Segway disarms most people, and they couldn't help but smile. But everyone didn't love Peter Laird's Segway. He also shares some stories of people yelling at him from cars and making fun of his scooter. This didn't slow down Peter at all. He was cruising into the future at 12 miles per hour. He bought more Segways for his friends and would scoot around town and local college campuses. Peter Laird was the leader of a Segway gang. And keep in mind, Peter Laird was 49 years old. This is 20 years after the Turtles came out. He goes on to boast about the maneuverability of the Segway, and how he even took his electric chariot off-road. The Segway was so powerful, it got Peter 2/3 of the way up a small hill in Massachusetts before the battery died. Peter was an advanced user now and began carrying around spare batteries. He shares a nice story about how he took an opportunity to ride around Dover, New Hampshire, the birthplace of the Turtles, and saw a bunch of TMNT landmarks like the house they lived in when they created the Turtles, and the post office where Kevin and Peter used to mail out Turtles comics. In the back of issue 11, Peter wrote, "Maybe this Segway thing is a phase I'm going through, and once the novelty wears off, they'll start to gather dust in my garage like my jet skis and dirt bikes. I don't know, but for now, I'm having a great deal of fun with them. I've taken to carrying one in the car with me wherever I go, just on the off chance I'll find a good place to go segging." Peter Laird was hooked. He really laid it all out in issue 11 of the Volume 4 comics. I've never seen anyone write so passionately about anything in the letters column before this. Usually, he writes a couple paragraphs, but this was a couple pages full of text. Peter Laird was in love with Segways, so it was no surprise he mentioned them again in issue 12. Although he only mentioned Segways to let the reader know he had more to say, but didn't have room, Segways were still on his mind. In issue 13, Peter Laird let the readers know that he has introduced Segways to Stan Sakai, creator of Usagi Yojimbo. Peter wrote that Stan learned quickly and rode the Segway using its highest performance setting. There's a picture of Peter and Stan on the inside front cover, and you can really feel the speed and power of these Segways. Stan Sakai also published a Segway picture on the back of issue 74 of his Usagi Yojimbo comic. Peter and his love for Segways was at a peak. He even had a turtle on a Segway for his 2003 Christmas card. But that all changed in the back of issue 14 when Peter reveals what he wanted to say in issue 12. There was an incident, a situation, an instance. It's unbelievable, but someone made fun of him, a grown man, for riding an electric scooter. Peter launches into a Segway rant that could only exist in 2004. I'll read through Peter's Segway manifesto and comment along the way. Peter wrote, "Anyway, I had been happily segging around UMass for about 40 minutes and was coming down one of the steeper hills, heading back to my car, when I started to hear this kind of flap, flop, flap noise from behind me. Exactly what you might expect to hear if someone wearing sandals was running after you. I didn't look behind me, but the noise continued to follow me for about a quarter of a mile. When I slowed to a near stop near the bottom of the hill, sure enough, a young guy wearing sandals ran up alongside me. At first, I thought he was curious about the Segway and wanted to ask me about it, but instead, he launched into a bizarre diatribe which went something like this. Why'd you spend $5,000 on something like that when I can do the same thing for free? You're taking up all kinds of room on the sidewalk and wasting energy. It's like driving a Hummer. That's like the worst kind of Republican George Bush thing you could possibly do." That's a bit of paraphrasing of what he said, but pretty darn close, I think. Having said his piece, he then continued running in an arc around one of the science buildings and ran back up the hill. I was speechless, as I generally am when faced with someone insulting a total stranger for no good reason. And, in this case, running that far down a hill in sandals to do so. What was stunning about what he said, though, was not so much how he said it, or that he said it at all, but the fact that every single point he made was wrong. And though he was clearly passionate about what he had to say, it was, distressingly, passion without much intelligence or clear perception. Let's take it point by point. Number 1. Why'd you spend $5,000 when I can do the same thing for free? Well, to begin with, you're not doing the same thing, pal. You're running, and I'm segwaying. Other than the fact that they are both done while standing up and involve moving, they are obviously two completely different things. I spent $5,000 so I could have a lot of fun cruising around nearly effortlessly for several hours on a silent, electrically powered, high-tech scooter. If you can't see the difference between that and running, I can't help you. It is telling that most of the people who have made rude, boorish comments about the Segway seem to not be able to fathom that segwaying is not walking, and vice versa. It's like their brains work up to the point of seeing someone standing up and moving, but after that, their brains turn off. I think it has something to do with the fact that the Segway represents a new and different paradigm of transport, and many people just can't wrap their unimaginative minds around it. Number 2. You're taking up all kinds of room on the sidewalk. No. The Segway was specifically designed to have a footprint which is roughly as wide as the average person's shoulders. And though the front to back measurements of the lower part of the Segway are in fact a few inches greater than the average person's length of foot, those measurements are much less than the space taken up by that average person's stride when they are walking down the sidewalk in question. This comment was even more ridiculous in context, as it was made to me as I was in a wide open area on one of the widest sidewalks at UMass, probably about 10 feet wide. And this was a day when very few people were around. In fact, other than me and this ignoramus, I don't recall anyone else in sight at that moment. Number 3. And wasting energy. Well, it is true that I'm using energy, but wasting energy? That's a value judgment, which I don't think is really your call, dude. If you consider that I could have been driving my gasoline-burning car the same distance around campus, I'm actually saving energy. And as it happens, I have charged that particular Segway from time to time using a voltage converter gadget from Radio Shack, which I plug into a power outlet in my car, thus converting the excess power generated by my car's alternator as I drive along into power to charge the Segway's batteries. I'm no electrical engineer, but I suspect the cost of that energy is very negligible. Number 4. It's like driving a Hummer. Given the abject silliness of this statement, I think it's safe to say that this guy has never driven a Hummer. I happen to own and occasionally drive a Hummer, so when I say that riding a Segway is nothing like driving a Hummer, I at least actually know what I'm talking about. My Hummer is a big, noisy, diesel-guzzling and exhaust-belching four-wheeler. My Segway is a small, quiet, non-polluting, electricity-sipping two-wheeler. Just a slight difference. Number 5. That's like the worst kind of Republican George Bush thing you could possibly do. So are you saying that Republicans in general, and George Bush in particular, are people who like to use and promote energy-saving, non-polluting, and forward-thinking technology? And if so, those are bad qualities? I'm sorry, something about that just does not compute. Fortunately, most people aren't as deluded or ill-mannered as Sandal Boy, and those kinds of incidents are rare. In fact, the more I segue around Northampton, the less often people stop to talk to me about it. Kind of a mixed blessing, as I was getting a kick of meeting new people in this way, while at the same time, I like to be left alone to enjoy my segwaying. What a wild tangent to go on. Peter was 49. I kind of feel bad for him. He's a multi-millionaire, he owns a Hummer, he created the Turtles, he's a total badass, but some goofy 20-year-old college kid is bullying him and picking on him. I bet the kid didn't even know that he was talking to Peter Laird, the creator of the Turtles. Back in 2004, there was no social media. You just had to run next to a guy and yell at him if you wanted to share your opinion. You can tell Peter Laird was really charged up, like his Segway battery. He loves these things. It's so bizarre how much space he dedicates to defending Segways in the letter column. There's no shortage of Turtle stuff to talk about either. The 2003 show in Tales Volume 2 had just started, so there was a lot of Turtles content the comic readers would have liked to read about, instead of some exchange Peter had with a stranger over Segways. Even the readers were into Segways at this point. In issue 16, a reader wrote in and asked about Segways. Peter revealed he'd like to see a Segway chase scene in a movie. Peter's love for Segways rippled through the Ninja Turtles community for years. A Ninja Turtles fan even made a custom Peter Laird Segway figure years later. How cool is that? But, as Ninja Turtle fans know, things change. And in 2011, Peter revealed something on his blog. A fan named Scott asked, "Do you still use the Segway? How often? Just curious since you don't blog about using it." Peter replied, "Once I realized how much fun recumbent and crank forward bicycles were, and how much good the exercise I got from riding them was for my health, I sort of lost interest in the Segways. Of course, that kind of coincided with almost all of my Segways ceasing to function due to various forms of gadget abuse, like riding them in 3 feet of water. Occasionally, I think of charging them all up and seeing if any of them still work. But I guess the thrill is gone, as B.B. King said. That's not to say anything negative about Segways. I still think they are amazing gizmos and tons of fun. I just don't need them in my life right now. Wow, I just don't need them in my life right now. This is a love story for the ages. The highs and lows and tragic ending. What a fun time capsule to read through. Segways were a weird fad back then, and they never really caught on. Although hoverboards and those scooter rental things became very popular over a decade later. Maybe Peter was just ahead of his time. There was even an official Ninja Turtles toy released in 2015 that came with a Segway. Even if they're a little goofy, Peter's love for Segways was sincere, and you can't fake that. That resonates with people. Peter was on fire for Segways, even if he eventually burned out. And guess what? Segways are really fun to ride. And maybe they did pave the way for other electric vehicles, like electric bikes and electric skateboards, and maybe even electric cars. Segway technology is propelling the human race into the future, at the speed of a Segway, 12 miles an hour. Thanks for watching. Feel free to leave a comment and share this video. Make sure to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more Ninja Turtles videos like this.